Welcome to the Top Order podcast. It's Christmas in June. It's Ashes time. Me and Baldy absolutely fizzing at the prospect of the Edgbaston Test coming up in less than a week's time. The old enemy meet. It's every 4 years on home soil, every 2 years, but it keeps getting bigger and bigger. And I think this one has got to be one of the most exciting Ashes series I can remember in my lifetime. We're going to preview everything around that little urn coming up on the Top Order podcast. Stay tuned. Well, it is Christmas Eve almost, isn't it, Baldy? We're gonna hand over to Stu in a minute because I don't think we can contain our excitement.
No, we should.
In terms of the show, but we do want to obviously preview the biggest series in world cricket, undoubtedly. Across the world, it's there isn't anything that compares to this, I'm sure. Border Gavaskar Trophy, maybe, but yeah, Lippy. Where do you want to start, mate?
We're just talking about the World Test Championship final, the World Test Championship final,
single game.
Yeah. Oh, I guess I want you to probably not go through the. All the history of England and Australia. We don't need to go through that, and I certainly don't need to listen to all of that. But I think even just noticing the excitement in your voice in that lead up, this feels a lot more exciting.
You're saying my intros aren't normally exciting?
Then you're not normally as pumped up as you were just then. And I think what I want to understand is there seems a bigger excitement this time around in the Ashes, and I want you guys to tell me. And I mean, look, I am interested in this series. I'm fascinated to see what happens. When we get to predictions, you probably could have convinced me lots of different ways. I wrote a few different things down on my piece of paper last night, trying to think about what would happen in this series. Which, from a neutral point of view, that's the point that I want to be at the start of the series. But from your point of view, why is this one seem so much more exciting than usual?
So I think, look, unfortunately, we are going to need a little bit of history, I think, in order to answer this question. And for me, what it comes back to is if I look at growing up, we weren't at the races in the Ashes from probably the early to mid 80s, I think, 1981, and I was too young for that, but saw it ad infinitum on the replays. It was really only probably 2005 where England thought they had a genuine chance of winning the Ashes, and that was on home soil, remember, that 2005 summer, and then subsequently got our arses handed to us in 06, 07 when Warne and Langer and Hayden destroyed us in their some of their swan songs. So I think what makes this one more exciting, if I kind of look at the last maybe 13, 14 years, it's pretty much gone, with the exception of 2010-11 where England won overseas. It's pretty much gone with the form book and gone almost as you would have expected it to go. This series seems to be after the shellacking we got in the Stuart Broad's Void series of 2021, and I say that firmly tongue in cheek, by the way. This seems like a genuine contest on English soil when we go back to 2019, where it was spoils shared really, and but for that fantastic innings at Headingley from Ben Stokes in 2019. Australia would have won the Ashes on English soil rather than just retaining them in 2019. So for me, it is that we've got two different styles of cricket going up against each other. Everybody has been saying, well, Bazball, it's worked in a one-off test. Oh, it's worked against New Zealand.
Everyone's been saying, you've been saying that for a long time.
It's worked against South Africa. Oh, it's worked against Pakistan. It's not going to work against Australia. But it's worked often enough now that I think there's that excitement going into this series. And then we've got a really, really good entree in this World Test Championship final with, Steve Smith batting like a Test match batsman and Scott Boland bowling like a Test match bowler. And are England going to hold their nerve and play the cricket they've been playing against that opposition? So that, for me, is why I'm absolutely fizzing for Edgbaston in a little less than a week's time.
Oh, I could not agree more. I mean, if you have a look at, as you say, the history of Test cricket between Australia and England over the last 40 years, one side has tended to dominate the other for a period of time. And let's not forget, Australia haven't won in England since 2001. That's a long time. England have won more recently.
Really?
Yep. 2005, 2009.
Haven't won a series in England.
Haven't won a series in England since 2001.
I would not have.
England
guessed
won
that.
in 2010, 2011 or something like that. One of those Australian summers.
So it was 2009. Yeah. So 2005, 2009, and then 2013. That was that Cardiff test with Monty Panesar and Jimmy Anderson, and then obviously. There was 2019, so they changed the cycle because of the World Cup years, etc.
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, that was the Jofra Archer breakthrough series, I suppose. So
2-2. We haven't won in England since 2001.
Wow.
And both sides, I think it's fair to say, are pretty close to the peak of their form. Australia have just come off a World Test Championship final victory over India. They've played some reasonably good Test cricket in the last 12 or 18 months, some series notwithstanding. And England in the last 18 months have been the form Test cricket playing nation in the world in all sorts of different conditions.
And it's not even 18 months, Baldy. It's more like sort of...
It's actually probably 12 or 13 months, yeah.
Can I just add, I from a neutral point of view, I think what is exciting about this series, and maybe more than the Border Gavaskar, certainly the Border Gavaskar when it's in India, is that I think conditions suit both sides. And we might get on to conditions and what, because what Ben Stokes has asked for certainly wasn't what we saw in the World Test Championship final.
Remember the ICC are in charge of that pitch?
Yes. But, we'll get on to that kind of stuff in a minute. But I think that's the exciting part, that I think both sides are well equipped to deal with. It's not like you're going to an away situation where you're really not that suited to those conditions. And that's kind of what we've seen, even though, I think on that flip side, India going to Australia has been very interesting in the last few years because of that same reason, because of India being able to build up a seam attack that can compete in those conditions.
I tell you why the conditions make it interesting for me is because I think it's going to challenge the notion of, England can score runs from anywhere. While we have seen them do that, I think it's going to be really interesting to see them do it in conditions that may favour seam bowling or bowling in general over the course of this series. So how are England going to respond to that? I think they'll respond to it really, really well. I think they'll continue to attack. And so not so much as will England fail, it's how successful will they be? How successful will Australia be at combating that, at asking those same kinds of questions of England's top order that Scott Boland and co asked of India in this last World Test Championship final? So it's not so much that they're even, it's that they're going to be challenged, but their capability, their potential is so sky high that it is so fascinating, I think, to watch.
But Binksy, I guess, we were going to maybe cover this a bit later, but we sort of got to conditions now. Ben Stokes, I feel like a couple of weeks ago, came out and said that he wanted, paraphrasing again, he pretty much said, I want to play on roads, didn't he? In this Ashes series, he said he wanted really good pitches that would score a lot of runs. Then, as I said, we saw the World Test Championship final. It seamed around a lot. It was a very green wicket. As you say, the ICC was in charge of that. Do you still think we're going to, what kind of pitches do you think we're going to see through the course of this series? Because that might have quite a big bearing on what we see and the type of cricket that we see.
Yeah, well, look, I think first we're starting the series quite early in an English summer, to be honest. So I think if you look at the way that England have played their Test cricket, their marquee series have come a little bit later in the summer. So June is a pretty early kickoff. I know historically that's not the case, but if we look at the last few Ashes, it's kicked off a little bit later. 2019 was after the World Cup, which didn't finish until sort of late May, early June, I think. So we've certainly got, a scenario here where there is a little bit of jeopardy is the wrong word, but I think we're playing at 5 grounds that look, to be honest, the only one where I've kind of got a little bit of an either or is Old Trafford or Trent Bridge. So we're not playing a Test match at Trent Bridge, but and look, I'm sure we'll get a few comments. I'm really glad we're not playing Cardiff. I'm really glad we're not playing in Durham. I'm really glad that the grounds we've picked are Birmingham, where the crowd will be partisan. That's probably where there is a little bit probably in the pitch at Edgbaston, and particularly early in the summer. Lords has been flat for a long, long time, so I think we'll see a flat wicket there. Headingley, really good wicket. When you get going on a beautiful day at Headingley, it's a very, very fast scoring ground. We've seen, a number of pretty big innings. I remember one from Gilchrist. I remember one from Mark Butcher, for example. I think he got 170 odd in that 2001 series we talked about. But when you look up, if there is a little bit of conditions around, that could
Can be good for bowling.
That could have either of the sides licking their lips with the overheads. Old Trafford, pretty flat, offers a bit of bounce as well. So I think that will be a good contest. And then the Oval's normally a pretty flat wicket end of July. So yes, I think we will see flat wickets, but I think you've got a couple of grounds, particularly Edgbaston and Headingley, where, the overheads and the weather in the lead up to the game could have a little bit of an impact on exactly how flat and how batting friendly those grounds are, notwithstanding the surfaces, I think. But look, I'm pumped that it's in that order, to be perfectly honest. I love a first Test match at Edgbaston.
And I guess to transition to, the key matchups and sort of the way this series is going to pan out, why do you think Stokes said that? Why do you think he would want... I mean, maybe he's just playing mind games and all of that kind of stuff, but why do you think it favours England to play on flat wickets?
So I'm not going to even answer that question. I'll just throw a question back at you. Why would you say he wants to play on bad wickets?
Well, I guess so. No, I understand that. But the impression that I got is that he wants to see runs scored, right? You often think in an environment where... let's say in the past, England have not been the favourites, right? You often think, sometimes you think, our strength is Anderson and Broad. Let's play on green seaming wickets. New Zealand has been guilty of this in the past, where we've got seamers that are going to do the job. We want to provide conditions that will suit those bowlers so that we've got the best chance to win Test matches. It seems like Stokes is, from those comments, the way I look at them, we back ourselves to score whatever you guys get. And is that the way you read it?
No, I just read it that if you actually look back, and I'll get a little bit technical, if you go back to the stage where every single test ground in England has invested heavily in its infrastructure, particularly the way the outfields drain. So all of them have got, excellent drainage now, so that when it rains, you're back on in an hour. That has made the pitches flat. For the last 10, 15 years in England, the pitches have been flat. I don't see any reason that we're not going to have flat pitches. We haven't done what New Zealand have done and tried to ambush overseas teams on green seamers.
I think, to be fair, New Zealand's pitches have actually played pretty flat.
I'm taking the piss, but look, we haven't had that for a long, long time. So you kind of go back a long time. For England going, we're going to nibble people out. We've actually, if you think about the way that we've structured our bowling attack, we've tried to get pace into the attack. We've tried to find a spinner that's going to give us that point of difference. Whether we've done it or not is another question. So look, I just think it's a comment that has probably been seized upon a little bit with who does it favour. All he's probably really asked for is good cricket, batting wickets. And I think that's what fans would want to see. Fans would want to see runs scored at 4, 5 and over for both teams. If Stokes is saying anything, what he's probably saying is, I don't care if Australia score at 4.5, we'll score at 4.75, or they score at 5 and 6, whatever. So I think that's that's probably more the mentality. So I'm not reading a massive amount into it, to be honest.
Okay, well, the two of you are notorious for playing down your own side. So what I want to do in terms of framing this, in terms of how the key battles are going to be won. Baldy, I want you to tell me who you're afraid of in the England side. Who are you concerned that England is going to take this game away from Australia when you look at that lineup?
Johnny Bairstow.
Why?
Johnny Bairstow, the last time he played Test cricket, scored 17 million runs at a strike rate of 197,000. He is a guy who's probably going to bat, I would say, 6 or 7 in the England side, maybe, and can do to Australia what Adam Gilchrist did for almost his entire career to England and to all sorts of attacks all around the world. Australia got India 5 down in the World Test Championship final. India fought back and got from 150 to 300. You give that same opportunity to Johnny Bairstow, and England go from 5 for 150 to 5 for 450. You know what I mean? He is the guy who can, even if Australia have an advantage and they have England 5 for 100, can go in and take that advantage away from Australia as quick as you like. England have all sorts of excellent batters, top to bottom, in their order. No one's a walking wicket. There's no weak link in their batting lineup, really.
Someone at the top. you might be able to argue, but anyway, you carry on.
In terms, but if you have a look at it, like Pope's in great form, Root's in great form, Harry Brook is a brilliant cricketer, will score lots and lots of runs for England. Ben Stokes does Ben Stokes things. You get through all of those and you still got to get Johnny Bairstow out. He is the X factor for England, and he's the reason that they can continue to attack even if they're 5 for 100.
Binksy, same question for you, Aussies?
Yeah, look, the thing I'm probably most worried about, I think, is Pat Cummins and Scott Boland, and maybe Hazelwood if he's fit, because I think that they're
supposed to be fit for the first test, I think.
Yeah, so I think that they're the guys that are going to ask the questions of that England top order. So whilst Duckett has had a pretty good start to the summer in that one-off test against Ireland, he had a fantastic winter as well, and has looked really, really good. Ollie Pope has grown into Test cricket. He's actually vice captain now, has been named as vice captain. So that's how much they really like him in the setup. There's still a worry for me that the way that those guys, Cummins and Boland, can bowl at that top order, and Hazelwood as well, is going to ask different questions than we've probably been asked. Because I think there was a little bit that this England sort of mentality came as a little bit of a blitzkrieg against the people that we've played against, and we were playing short test match series against, you guys, against South Africa.
I think it definitely hit New Zealand as a big surprise.
And people probably like, oh, well, by the time they've done it in one test, they're like, well, they won't do it again, will they? Oh, no, they have. Oh, shit, it's the third test. So I think we now know that that's going to come. So for me, that's the concern. The other thing I think is that Nathan Lyon is going to be really, really key, particularly the way that Australia are going to set their side up with, Cameron Green offering really the first time Australia had a proper all-rounder.
For a long time.
For a long, long time. Gilchrist and Warner, as we've talked about a lot on the podcast, balance that, great side really, really well. But neither of them was a traditional all-rounder. They gave that balance. So Lyon again is probably the other person that I'm really scared of. From a batting perspective, it's probably Travis Head. And also
for the same reasons as Baldy's saying about Bairstow?
Yeah, look, I think he's coming in with form, and he's going to counter attack, and he's going to play that play that role. And then I think the other thing that I'm worried about, Steve Smith goes without saying, he's going to average 60 because Steve Smith averages 60 in England.
Yeah.
I'm also worried, particularly now he's retired or says he's going to retire, more about David Warner as well, because I think that a wounded bull, see what I've done there,
yeah.
That's probably one of those things that he might just go out with a real hiss and a roar in his final Ashes series.
Seeing as I'm running the show here, let's talk about spin for a little bit. So, let's just give a quick shout out to Daniel Vettori for winning the World Test Championship. The long line of New Zealanders that have won that tournament, but he's obviously a big part of Australia's assistant coaching now, and I'm sure having a big hand in spin. Baldy, you've talked about Nathan Lyon. I think when India was there, last, very much critical of him, saying that you didn't think he was really up to Ashwin and all of that kind of stuff. Would you like to make an apology? And then I guess
I'm happy to walk it back.
Let's just remember to edit this bit out.
Yeah.
Well, and then I guess I think that it is worth talking about maybe the role that spin might play in this, and sort of getting on to England, because England have obviously had Jack Leach and been playing him very consistently over a number of years now, and actually picking him in all conditions and saying, okay, it doesn't really matter. Like, even if it's a seam-friendly track, we're going to play a spinner. Australia have done this exact same. And they're sort of one of the only couple of sides, I think, around the world that have had that level that have gone, okay, we are going to pick a spinner because we think that's important. England now doesn't have Leach, so we'll get on to what they're going to be doing. But how important is Lyon going to be to balance out this Australian attack?
Hugely important, because it does two things. It gives their strike bowlers, Cummins, Boland, etc., a bit of a rest when he's able to bowl long overs, particularly in the first innings. And we know that England are going to attack Australia. If I was England, I would be targeting Nathan Lyon to try and hit him out of the attack early on in the series.
I think they'll target all of your bowlers.
That's
the way they're playing, right?
Right, exactly. But I think in particular, they will have written on their big whiteboard planning thing, we will attack Nathan Lyon. We will hit Nathan Lyon out of the attack. when Nathan Lyon is under pressure, I would like to see him be bold and be brave and continue to target the batters outside the off stump rather than reverting to going around the wicket and trying to sort of tuck a batter up and keep them out of their strike zone.
While you're on that, to be fair, I think he's done a really nice job of coming around the wicket. He did a fantastic job in that World Test Championship to get Rohit Sharma around the wicket. He's become actually pretty expert at coming around the wicket, pitching it on middle to hit middle.
Yeah, he's very comfortable there, right? He's very comfortable bowling around the wicket, particularly when he's being attacked. I would like to see him challenge both edges of England batters' bats, because I think he bowls a really, really good, if not arm ball, then straight ball, and he's going to get a little bit of bounce, and I think that's going to be really, really key. If England just play him off the wicket, and they play him like a slow medium pacer, they're going to marmalise him. So he's got to be really, really brave. And if he is, I think he can do a really, really good job for Australia and put England under pressure.
Yeah. I think it's also key for him that, Pat Cummins has said he wants to play all 6 test matches this summer as well. So, even more important, I think, that Lyon's able to do that holding role.
Yep.
Because otherwise you're putting too many overs into Pat Cummins' legs as well. And, he is probably the world's best seamer at the moment, Pat Cummins, I would say.
Well, we might get on to Scott Boland in a minute. But what are England going to do? They've picked Moeen Ali, and he's just going to play?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this, and I've written something down that's quite a bold comment. I actually don't think it's that big a deal that Jack Leach is out of the side. And my rationale,
that's especially bold.
And my rationale behind that is, you talked about the fact that Jack Leach has become an important part of this side. I think the only thing that I've got in terms of England is most teams are really, really, really well prepared, and they know what their depth chart is nowadays. We don't necessarily have that. We've had to put out an SOS to Moeen Ali to come in and play. All that notwithstanding, the reason I don't think it's a big deal is that Leach has been used in a slightly different way by Ben Stokes. What he hasn't done is said to him, mate, I want you to come and hold an end up. He's come and said, I want you to try and take wickets. And the plans that Leach will have used to take those wickets might be different to the plans that they might use for Moeen Ali. But what I don't think they're going to ask Moeen Ali to do is come in and bowl a 15, 16, 17, 20 over spell. I think they're going to go, hold on, we've got a left-hander in here, you're going to bowl a spell. Hold on, we need a wicket here. We're going to bring the men off the sweep, and you're going to try and really spin your off break as hard as you can. If you get smashed, it's fine. So I think they're going to use him in almost the same way that they've used Leach, which is we're going to have some plans for how Moeen Ali is going to take wickets, and we're going to use him not necessarily in short spells, but the intention of him bowling long spells to hold and end up, that's not the way that they're going to use him, which if that was, he wouldn't be able to do that, having not played a red ball game for, I think, 2 years, maybe even longer.
I think it's 2021, yeah.
And he's not bowled more than 10 overs in a game since then either. So, that would have been a really, really big ask if you're asking him to settle into long spell. So I don't think it's a big deal. And I think I'd also say, and interested to get your view on this, I think he'll bowl more wicket-taking balls if he plays 5 test matches than Jack Leach would have done.
Probably, yeah. I've always thought he was quite underrated as a bowler. What's sort of weird to me is that he often plays one-day cricket or white ball cricket and doesn't bowl. We've talked about this on the podcast before, and I guess that gives me a bit of pause when I think, why aren't they bowling him? Like when I see him, and I think back to when we had Jeetan Patel on the podcast, and he was talking about how, out of the hand, Moeen Ali is 100% easily the best spinner in England. And I've always thought that. He spins the ball nicely, he's put nice drift on the ball. Yeah, I've always thought that. Then you look at the stats, he averages 65 against Australia, and they're probably not shaking in their boots. So, yeah, very, very interesting to see what happens.
We haven't even talked about Mo Ali's batting. Like, he is a really, really good number 8 batter for England.
Oh, yeah.
And he might even bat number 9. He might even bat after Ollie Robinson. So
I don't think so.
He might. He might not.
He might if he's caught on the toilet or something.
True.
Let's move to the seamers now, because I think there are a lot of, and maybe this leads into selection kind of questions for both of you. Binksy, what the makeup of this England bowling attack? We talked about it last week in terms of there was 11 seamers I think we named off the cabs off the rank. How many of them are fit now? Give us an update on the likes of Mark Wood, Ollie Robinson. Is everyone back fit? Everyone available?
Yeah, so my understanding is everyone is available now. So with the exception of Jofra Archer, and Ollie Stone. So I think Woakes is back in the mix. I think Robinson and Wood fit. So I'm sure Baldy, may play a little bit of kidology here, but England have got far many more selection questions. Aussie have got one, which is if Hazelwood's fit, does he play ahead of Boland? And England have probably got a question around what are they going to do for that first Test match? And again, brutally honest here, they aren't thinking about later in the series.
No.
They are not doing what England have done under an Andy Flower regime or a Peter Moore's regime. They are looking at this Test match. They're probably not even looking at it now. They're probably looking at the fact they've got a tea time tomorrow at the Belfry, and they'll think about the cricket on the day before the game, which is when they'll switch on. So I think the question really is around the balance of that bowling attack. I'm sure I'm going to be proved massively wrong, and they'll go in with an all-seam attack at Edgbaston. But I don't think you would have gone and had that conversation with Moeen Ali and said, "Do you want to be in the squad?" I think they'll have gone and said, "Hey,
he's playing.
You're playing. This is this is a game plan that we can be really, really sure of." It's his home ground, so he's whilst he's been playing his county cricket at Worcestershire until this year. Him and his cousin and his brother grew up at Warwickshire. His dad's still involved down there at the indoor school. He's a bear, so he's going to be playing on his home ground. Again, this all just leads to him not being selected. But I think the question then is whether or not it's Broad or Wood that misses out. Going into this game, because I think Anderson, if fit, which I think he is,
plays,
is a lock, and I think also Ollie Robinson is a lock ahead of Stuart Broad as our best line bowler.
I agree,
regardless of whether or not Broad's got the wood on one player, David Warner. I don't think that's going to come into the thinking. I think Ollie Robinson is now the second seamer after Anderson that they'll pick. So the question mark for me is really Broad or Wood if Ali plays.
How many tests do you think Wood will play in this series? Because I think in the past they've been really cautious with him. But then again, in that series, I think back to that 2021 series against Australia, and I think he played 4 tests in that series.
He was good.
Out of a disastrous series for England. That was I don't know if that was the rock bottom, but that was the time when everyone was kind of making jokes about England. Everyone on that tour seemed terribly, terribly disappointed even to be there. He was the one that looked absolute quality and actually looked like he put a bit of a fright up some of those Australian batters. Do you think are they going? Then, like you say, they're not going to be. I don't think they're going to be cautious with him at any point. Are they just going to let him loose and try and play all these games?
Look, I really don't know. So I think if I were, again, and this is the problem, right? England don't strategise the way that they would have, They'd have actually normally probably had a spreadsheet and gone, well, this is what we expect in terms of the pitches.
He's going to play on these
He's going to play in these. Yeah. If I'm doing it with that old-fashioned mentality, I probably think he misses out at Lords, because Lords is probably the pitch that's going to offer him the least. You've got the slope. You've got a little bit of nibble, and you play your line bowlers there. You play Jimmy Anderson, you play Stuart Broad, you play Ollie Robinson, and a bit of Ben Stokes. So that's the way I would have probably planned this on a set of spreadsheets. I think they'll go, are you fit? Are you raring to go? Yeah, sweet. All right, cool. Yeah. If that's the way that they want to, the way that they want to go throughout the course of the series. So I'm not going to predict how many he's going to play or how many anyone's going to play. I think they'll make some bold decisions.
I hope they let him loose.
I do too. Honestly, if I was Australia and I was thinking about who I'm afraid of, Mark Wood's probably at the top of that list, pretty much, unless you're David Warner, in which case you're having nightmares about the Nighthawk. But genuinely for Australia, Mark Wood offers a point of difference in that attack, right? He's capable of bowling 90 to 95 miles an hour. He's probably the only one who's likely to play multiple test matches in this series who's going to really do that, unless England go for,
Josh
Tongue can, but is he going to play ahead of all of those other guys? Maybe not, particularly if Wood's fit. Yeah. I'd be playing Wood in every test match that he's fit. Every single one. And I'd be choosing between Robinson and Broad, like Adam said. I would lead one way, Adam might lean the other way. But if he's fit, I would be playing him because he offers that point of difference in that England attack. And he could ruffle some feathers in Australia, as he has done in the past.
What are Aussie going to do, though, Baldy, with this Boland question? Because he was fantastic. I mean, anyone who's just listened to our World Test Championship review has heard me talk about Scott Boland and in glowing terms. And I think how do you leave him out? Because, I mean, how do you leave him out? Because I think that Hazelwood, probably in English conditions, is almost, again, one of the first names on your team sheet. So I don't quite know how they do it, but I feel like Boland's made such a strong case now that you have to find a spot for him somewhere.
And the only spot that you can find for Scott Boland, if it's not going to be for Josh Hazelwood, is for Mitchell Starc. And this is the slight concern that I have about Mitchell Starc's form. And we always question, I mean, people always question Mitchell Starc's form, but you have a look at his record. He's got a lot of wickets. But he also can be erratic in the same way that Mitchell Johnson was sometimes erratic for Australia. And, you know, if we think back to the last Ashes Test series, he knocked Rory Burns over with a it was a leg side half volley.
No, Burns missed.
But Burns missed.
Hair was in his eyes.
But it swung back and here's off stump. It set the tone for the series, is what I'm saying. Mitchell Starc is the only Australian bowler who's left-handed who is a touch above in terms of if he's on song, he's unplayable.
Oh, yeah.
He can be unplayable and he can hit the stumps from just about anywhere. So that's, I think, the question mark for Australia is what version of Mitchell Starc are they going to get? And are they going to get a Mitchell Starc that can control the ball at 6 or 7 overs old and you give it to Hazelwood and Cummins or Hazelwood and Cummins and Boland to open the bowling and then Mitchell Starc comes on? I don't know. I would be tossing up in the same way that England are probably tossing up Broad and Robinson. You'll be potentially tossing up now Boland and Starc, potentially.
I think the thing is, though, with Boland and Hazelwood, you know what you're going to get.
Yep.
You're going to get, and I think
is that the argument that only one of them plays?
So I think I was listening to a podcast and it was Mitchell Johnson actually talking about probably the struggles that he had between the series in, would it have been 09 maybe? 09. And then the 2013-14 series where he was absolutely phenomenal. He got 37 wickets in the series. And one of the sound bites from that was what he was trying to do was make the difference between his best game and his worst game smaller. Mm-hmm. And I think if you were England, you probably go with the fact that Starc on song is probably as impactful as Boland. Starc not on song is someone that you can probably get on top of.
Yep.
So England would probably say, well, it's a difficult one because if Starc's on song, he's got the capability of ripping through you. Boland, you're going to get an 85% performance out of him every single Test match, and then he's going to have the odd 90 and 95, whereas Starc might have the odd 70% performance. So look, it's a really, really tough one and a fascinating one as we go into that first Test match.
Last thing before we get into sort of the predictions and what we think is going to actually happen in the series, now that we've covered most of the ground. Binksy, the one last thing I do want to ask is about Zak Crawley, because when I look at these teams on paper, he is the glaring weakness, I think, when I see. I still have no confidence that he is going to succeed at any point. I know that he plays some innings that look very nice and at short times. Do you think he's going to last the series?
Well, look, you're ruining one of my bold predictions if you make me answer that now. But look, I think that again they've put a lot of money into Zak Crawley, and they've absolutely backed him. And I think one of the things that they're talking about is that he is going to be able to score that absolute match-winning performance maybe twice during the series. So look, I actually think he's going to have potentially a series where he does something Michael Vaughan like in 02-03 and he peels off 3-4 big hundreds in a series.
Wow.
So I think they're gonna stick with him. I think they look around the county game. There's not too many players playing in the mould that they want, because I think from a county perspective, the wickets have nibbled around a little bit early in the season, as they're going to do. And clearly your county coach is the one that's, telling you how you're going to bat and what the game plan is, and that, they're not necessarily going about it in the same way as this England team. So I think they'll stick with him because he's the guy that sort of buys into the methodology. The only thing, that I would say is that there's probably one person in my bold predictions that, might upset that apple cart.
Well, let's get to them. I do think an interesting point around that is I think Matt Roller just interviewed Colin Munro on Crick Info, and he talked to he talks about how Brendan McCullum basically, his mindset is those match-winning performances. That he's talking more about T20. He talked about it when he came on our podcast, Colin Monroe, and talked about how Brendan kind of said to him, we want you to have this many match-winning performances in a tournament. I think probably he has the same thought, right, about Zak Crawley in this Ashes. He wants him to have 2 match-winning performances in this Ashes series, or even one, and he's probably done his job, even if he fails in all of the other innings. So, yeah, that is a fascinating point. Let's get on to predictions then, and maybe, let's expand this a little bit, because we haven't talked about how the series is actually going to play out. So I want your score prediction, and then I actually want you to kind of justify that in terms of how you think not game by game, but how you think the games will go and why you think that score. Let's start with you, Baldy, because you're furthest away.
I think, and that often I err on the side of the opposition.
Always.
Always. I didn't in the World Test Championship final, so
paid off.
And I'm going to say honesty to on. I think England win this series. And I think that England win this series because they have so much firepower with the bat that all other things being equal, that firepower wins out. So they've got the ability to take 20 wickets, and we've talked about that a lot in terms of England's ability to turn their results around over the last 12 months. They've taken 20 wickets on regular occasions. They can still do that. You have a look at their bowlers. They've got Ali, Broad, Anderson, Robinson, Wood, Potts, Tongue, Woakes. Choose 3 of 7 from that fast bowling contingent. They've got more depth than Australia in the fast bowling, and they've got lots and lots of options that can hurt Australia in terms of the batting. And I think for all of those reasons, all other things being equal, England win that series 3-1. My only ask for Australia is that it's a live series going into the Oval. So maybe 3-2 at best.
Binksy?
Yeah, look, we were just talking before off air about this and asked Baldy the question, would you rather be 3-0 in the series over, or would you rather be 2-2 going into the Oval?
3-0, obviously, if I could ask for something.
Yeah, see, this is the thing that Bazball, and I know that everybody doesn't like that term, but that's what this has done to me and to cricket, is that actually that's the outcome.
You want the drama.
When I think back about it, the drama of that 05 series, whilst it was nerve-wracking, that Edgbaston test match with, Australia needing 3 to win, going into the Oval with, Peterson taking on Brett Lee and just clearing the boundary with top edges and going on and getting 150 odd, and Ashley Giles getting, I think, 50 in that game as well. It's that drama that you kind of remember. So whilst it would be great to kind of be 3-0 up and kind of have it done and dusted and be thinking about where the guys are going to play golf, I just really, really hope it's 2 each going into the Oval. And I think it's going to be too close to call. I genuinely cannot pick who wins this series. The only thing I will say is that I think Baldy named all of the England seamers a minute ago and said, we've got strength in depth. I'd rather have Cummins, Hazelwood, Stark and Scott Boland as 4-seamers than 8 guys where, only maybe 2 of them are in that bracket. So I think it's going to be that Australian bowling firepower versus that England batting firepower. And that's why I also think the tosses are quite important, because I think Bairstow is going to score more runs when he's not kept wicket. So I think you might even see him bat 1 higher, maybe 2 places higher if England bat first. You've got to remember that all of his success in that, that's last summer, came batting at number 5
and not holding the gloves.
So batting at 5 and not holding the gloves. So look, I honestly cannot make a prediction. I hope it's 2-2 going into the Oval. So I hope that the series is a 3-2, but I wouldn't know who it's going to go to.
That's a bit of a cop-out. But I look, it's a bit of a cop-out, and I'll just quickly throw in that Raj's prediction, I did ask, he's not here for this recording, but I did ask him, and he actually predicted 3-1 England as well. No details on that, but before I get into my little...
He thinks Australia are going to get pasted.
Yeah.
He thinks Australia are going to get humped by England, and that they're going to score 1 million runs and bowl Australia out for not very many on a lot of occasions. So... Yeah. He's very bullish about England's chances in this Test series, notwithstanding, Adam's, kidology and doesn't want to jinx stuff. But Raj is pretty bullish.
It's not that I don't want to jinx it. It's just I genuinely don't.
It's hard. It's tough to call. I mean, even saying England are going to win 3-1, I think is undercutting Australia a little bit,
Well, and that's what I had. I'm very much more with Binksy here in that I wrote down my prediction. I sort of, initially when I think about series predictions, I just write down the first number that kind of comes to my head. And I wrote down 3-1 Australia. And I wrote that down, and then I think I think a lot of that from a New Zealand point of view is Australia always wins. That's kind of like this horrible feeling that I always have. And I think also looking back at the Ashes and thinking that Australia usually maybe retain the Ashes, it surprised me again that you just said before that Australia has not won a series in England since 2001. That is an enormously surprising number to me, and something that I would not have even thought, because I just feel like Australia has been dominant in the Ashes, whether that's been true or not.
We've had drawn series having won the Ashes in Australia. That's where we get away with that sort of sense of dominance.
Yeah, but so I wrote down 3-1, and then I sat there and thought about it, and then I flipped it over and it went 3-1 England, and I went, oh no, that's, and I genuinely feel, just like you said, I have no idea what's going to happen in this series. And I think from a neutral point of view, like I said at the start of the show, that is what's so fascinating about this series, because, yeah, we've looked at this England's batting or this England way of playing this game, and we keep thinking it's going to fail, and it just hasn't. They've been fantastic. I actually ended up writing 3-2 Australia. So we do sort of have someone, I guess, who's now predicted Australia on here to kind of counter what you guys have said. But I also agree with Binksy in that I think that Australian seam attack is much better than England, and actually is much better than England's in terms of the way that they are placed to face the English batting lineup. And I think that they provide more challenges than any other seam attack has been able to provide to this kind of Bazball style of cricket, because they bowl those areas, but they also bowl them a little bit quicker than, let's say, the New Zealanders have been able to do. They bowled them in different conditions than the Indians have been able to go and do. So yeah, I really think that battle between those Australian seamers and that English batting lineup is the key one that will decide this. Because I think, like you said, Smith, Labuschagne, Travis Head, even I think Australia will put enough runs together to win this series. It'll be whether England can chase down those runs that kind of determines who wins these games. So yeah, absolutely fascinating stuff. Bold predictions. Let's start with you this time, Binksy. You teased one about Zak Crawley.
Yeah, so I've got three bold predictions here. So I'm going to read out some scores here. Last 8 innings: 100, 79, 2, 81, 83, and 95. So those scores are Dawid Malan playing for Yorkshire, which includes 100 in the county championship at a strike rate of 74. So I think he's the next cab off the batting rank for England.
Played in that last series down under.
For the reason that he's buying in and he's taking a spot at number 4 for Yorkshire. Sam Hain's the other guy who's scoring a lot of runs for Warwickshire that might be an option. And then the other thing is I think Ben Foakes will play a part in this series. And
wishful thinking?
No, not wishful thinking at all. But I think that England at some point will introduce some fresh blood into the series, regardless of where it's going as well. So I think they've said that he's a big part of that side moving forward, and I think that Bairstow looked a little bit laboured keeping wicket. Granted, first game back in the big show, England Ireland at Lords. So I think again to maybe protect his batting stock, I think we'll see Foakes throughout this series as well.
I 100% agree with you. I think that particularly if England fall behind, that they will elevate Johnny Bairstow to number 5. They'll stick.
He might even open.
He might open, but I would say that England might stick Pope into open and stick Harry Brook at number 3, and then stick Bairstow in at 5 and bat Foakes at 7, and just say Johnny Bairstow, just score as many runs as you want. Don't worry about carrying the gloves. Don't worry about any of that extra responsibility. Just go and score 1 billion runs. So particularly if England
first squad for 2 tests.
Yeah, the name is got to the first 2
Yep.
2 tests. Yeah,
Baldy.
My bold prediction is that Mark Wood will be the difference between the two sides with the ball. He will have 30-plus wickets and be the leading wicket taker.
30-plus
wickets. 30-plus wickets.
Wow.
He will play every test that he's fit, and he will run through Australia with his combination of pace and bounce. Speaking of which, he will run through Marnus Labuschagne.
The Baldy v Marnus battle has started. Don't change Marnus. The stuff you were doing in that World Test Championship final with the appeals and everything. Please continue. Sleeping. Just keep doing it all.
It's not an anti-Marnus thing. I think that he has been found out against really, really fast bowling short of a length. I think he's been found out, and I think Mark Wood is ideally positioned of just about anyone in world cricket to exploit that. I think he'll have his number. Marnus Labuschagne to average under 30. Mark Wood to have 30-plus wicket. And my favourite English player, YJB, because he's got brilliant initials, a brilliant batter, and has got terrific hair, will average over 60 in the series.
I've only got one bowl prediction down, and that's actually just that Ben Duckett is the leading run scorer for England throughout the series. I've been super, super impressed with the way he's come into the side and kind of bought into everything that he's done. And, you know, we touched on it last week about how he doesn't leave the ball. He puts so much pressure on the bowlers by playing. Yes, you can say he gives the bowlers chances, I guess, by going and doing that. But, yeah, I've been very impressed with him. And I suppose if he goes on and does that, that puts England in a really nice position if they can get on the front foot. And I guess the other bowling one from an Australian point of view is I do think Nathan Lyon will have a significant part to play in this series. As I've told you guys off air about 5 times, I just loved the way he picked up that wicket, Jadeja, in the World Test Championship final, the flight, the spin, Daniel Vettori's giant beard helping him out. It's all pointing towards Nathan Lyon extending his career for a little bit longer and playing a big part in this series. Take us away, Binksy.
Awesome. Well, guys, been a pleasure talking about that. And look, I think, again, just to reinforce how fizzed I am, I'm not even going to buy into Baldy's bullshit and try and give some of this kidology stuff about, you know, Mark Wood ripping through and Labuschagne having a shit series. I don't need to do any kidology. I'm just really, really looking forward.
Let's hope it lives up to it.
Looking forward to this.
I am too.
Super excited.
I really am excited for this series.
Yeah. Well, guys, been a pleasure chatting through the Ashes. We will be back in your feed, obviously, to review each and every one of these test matches throughout the course of the summer. Also hoping to get a few episodes on the go in between the games as well, with some special guests on the podcast. So do stay tuned throughout this English summer. We're heading into the winter here in New Zealand. It's getting pretty cold, but it's warm under lights in our Ashes preview studio here. So do dip into the back catalogue on YouTube, give us a like and a subscribe. Spending a little bit of time trying to get a following on video as well as audio. So dip into the back catalogue. We've got some Ashes interviews in there as well. So notably Mike Hussey, go and have a listen to that. But for now, it is good night and God bless from us all on Ashes Eve here in Auckland. Me and Baldy will be watching that first ball with a non-alcoholic gin and tonic or something like that in just a few days' time. But for now, good night and God bless from us here in Auckland. We'll see you soon. Good night.